Welcome 4-H Summer Camp. I'm Dr. Leanne Kinman.
And I am Dr. Drew Carcass.
And today we're going to talk to you about beef carcass cuts, and ways to cook them.
So here we have the entire beef carcass, and we separate between the 12th and 13th rib to evaluate the carcass's quality and yield grade. Now, if you look right here, this is where that 12th rib has been taken off, and we've exposed our ribeye muscle. And here's where we're going to evaluate our quality and yield grade. Now, quality grade tells us overall palatability, so how it's going to taste. So a higher quality graded carcass is a more palatable, more tender, more juicy product. A yield grade tells us how it's going to cut out, so how much meat or product are we going to get from a carcass. A better numerical yield grade 1, will be a higher cutability carcass, meaning more cuts coming from it. A lower cutability or lower yielding carcass, yield grade 5, will result in least amount of edible portion or least amount of product coming from that carcass.
Today we're going to focus on the 4 wholesale cuts of the beef carcass. You have the round, the loin, which is broken down into 2 separate parts, which we'll delve into just a little bit further, the rib, and the chuck section. So now let's talk about the various retail cuts that we can get from each section. First, we'll focus on the forequarter of the carcass.
So the first section of the forequarter we're going to talk about is going to be the chuck, and that's this lower section right here, and that's pretty much the shoulder of the animal. Now the chuck is a lot of times used for locomotion, so for movement. And so with that, a lot of the muscles in the chuck are being very tough. However, there's one muscle that sits onto this scapula bone or blade bone we have right there, and it sits just like that. And we have 2 muscles here that attach to the scapula. We have the first one right here, which is the infraspinatus muscle, and it sits right there. The next muscle we have is this one right here, and that is our supraspinatus muscle, and it attaches right there. So both these bones are attached, both these muscles, are attached to the same bone, but both very different. This infraspinatus muscle is the second most tender muscle in the entire body, right behind our psoas major. Now this is probably familiar to you as a flat iron or a top blade steak. A flat iron steak is where we take that muscle and we open it up and we fillet it out. And what lies right between those two is a big piece of connective tissue. And so that sits right in the middle of it. So when we fillet it out, kind of like we do a fish, then you have 2 muscles free of connective tissue, and it's actually a very good lean cut of beef, great for grilling, especially now during summertime months. And so that is your flat iron steak. Some other muscles we get from the chuck will be like a chuck roast. You put into a roasting pot with some moisture. And then also, more importantly, the one we're more common with, especially here in Texas, is going to be our brisket. And that's this section right through here. That is our deep pectoral muscle of the carcass. A very, very tough cut. A lot of connective tissue in there, a lot of collagen in that muscle. And so making sure you cook this very low and slow is really important to make sure that's very tender and still juicy.
All right, now we're going to move on to the rib section of the carcass, so moving on up just into the forequarter a little bit. The rib section here is going to comprise of the 6th rib to that 12th rib, where we rib that carcass at. The rib is actually the second most expensive or the second most valuable cut of a rib carcass because of that ribeye. So we have a small little ribeye right here as an example. We have a ribeye steak, a boneless ribeye steak. Comprises of 2 muscles. You're probably very familiar with these, longissimus and the spinalis dorsi. So this is what you would find in the grocery store. This is great in the summertime because we're just going to throw it on a grill, cook it to about a medium rare temperature, and enjoy it for the rest of the day. What you'll see with a ribeye is just like Dr. Carcass talked about when we were talking about quality grade and palatability. You want to see more marbling or white flecks of fat here in that longissimus muscle. The more flecks of fat we have, the higher the palatability, or the higher the quality, the better the palatability, so more tender, juicy, flavorful eating experience. Within the rib section also, we'll separate the rib from the plate. So the plate, a few cuts that we can get from that would be short ribs. Short ribs, you're going to cook low and slow. You're going to braise those, put those in a crock pot or in an oven with some moisture, and cook those down to make those a tender cut.
So going into the next section we have would be our loin right through here. Take that. And it's part of our hindquarters. That's the 13th rib and up. Now our short one, we have some very common and known cuts of beef that you're all familiar with. Those would be your New York strip, your tenderloin, your T-bones, and porterhouses. So your New York strip comes from right here, and that is a boneless short loin, and it's comprised of our cut like this. This would be a New York strip steak, a Kansas City strip steak, or a top loin steak. And so that lies right through here on the carcass. Now the most tender muscle in the entire body, the psoas major muscle, or your tenderloin, which is shown here, lies on the inside of the carcass. And so it sits up just like so. So once again, very tender cut, the most tender muscle in the entire body, referred to as the psoas major, tenderloin, or also the filet mignon. Really good for grilling onto, putting on the grill on a hot day. Really good tender steak. Next, we have the sirloin section, which is up here at the very top. The sirloin section has a really good sirloin steak, a very lean cut, not a lot of fat on it, so if you're looking for a more lean steak to grill out on, I would definitely suggest using something here in that sirloin. And then a really cool and common cut we get from the sirloin as well is going to be our tri-tip. And that lies about right through here. Now the tri-tip is very common in California on the West Coast. It's used in all the barbecue stuff. And so if you go to the West Coast, ask for a barbecue sandwich, you'll get a tri-tip sandwich. Instead of like here in Texas, we get a brisket sandwich. But a really good, cool cut you can take, put it onto the grill, or smoke it like you would a brisket, and it's really good, got a lot of flavor. Next, we can look over here at some other good grilling steaks, grilling cuts will be our skirt steak. Now our skirt steak, we have two sections of it. We have the outside skirt, and we have the inside skirt. The outside and the inside skirt are really good for grilling for fajitas. So you take this cut, put it into a fajita marinade, throw onto the grill, slice it very thin with some tortillas, and it's a really great summertime cut you can take and eat. And then lastly, we have a flank steak, which sits right up in here. So the flank steak is also very similar to like a skirt steak would be. You take that, put it into a marinade, slice it really thin. Another cool way to use a flank steak is to take and thin it out really nicely, put some cream cheese and then some veggies in there, roll it up, and you have some meat pinwheels. It's a really cool and innovative way of using that flank steak for a grilling application.
Okay, the last wholesale cut we're going to talk about is the round. The round, just like the chuck, is a locomotion muscle. So there's a lot of movement in that area of the carcass. There's a lot of connective tissue. The muscle fibers are very big and dense, a lot of connective tissue. So just like we learned with the chuck, with anything that's very tough and has a lot of connective tissue, we can't throw that on the grill. We're going to have to put that in a crock pot. We're going to have to use some moist heat conditions to basically hydrolyze that connective tissue to break it down to make that a tender product. So some of the cuts we can get from the round, a lot of times in the grocery store you're going to see an eye of round. The eye of round sits up in there. You can make an eye of round roast, an inside round roast, a Pike's Peak roast comes from that area. So a lot of roast, or just like we do here in Texas, we love chicken fried steak. So we can take those particular cuts, we can cut them about a ½ inch thick, run them through a tenderizer, batter them, make some cream gravy, you have your chicken fried steak. The only other thing we can do with the chuck, obviously besides some roast or the chicken fried steak, we can turn it into ground beef. We'll have some really lean ground beef from that area as well too. So this has basically covered an entire beef carcass. The 4 wholesale cuts, and then some of our normal cuts that you'll see in the grocery store, some that you're familiar with, the ribeye, the New York strips, but then just like Dr. Katzman's talked about, some of the value-added cuts that meat scientists and universities have been working on. The flat iron, we want to add value to cuts that we've typically thrown into ground beef. Dr. Cousins, anything you'd like to add?
I think that's it. I think, we've got a great summer this summer, nice and hot, but make sure you go out there, use the grill, use these cuts we talked about, and enjoy your time.
Thank you all very much.